Welcome, everybody, back to the Film Neighbor Network. I'm Brayton Lydell. I'll be moderating today. We've got a real treat because we're talking to members of the electric department. We have Mark Pasqualato. Go ahead and wave, Mark.
Hello.
Anthony Pasella. Hi. And Elliot Spitzer.
Hello.
I'll kick it off to whoever wants to start. Just tell us a very condensed story of your whole career. How did you break into the industry and get to this point? Whoever wants to start.
I guess I'll go first. My name is Mark Pasqualato. I'm from Buffalo. I started making short films and things like that with my friends in high school. I had a media production class that I was really interested in. Wanted to try and make a career out of it, and I wanted to be a DP, so I thought I'd join camera department. But camera department is very competitive. Even on big shows, there's maybe 7 people in camera department. So after a year or two of doing that, I started looking at other options, and I thought maybe G&E. And when I started telling people I wanted to work in G&E, I started getting work much faster just because there's more opportunities. But after I started doing it, I fell in love with it and realized that I care a whole lot more about how a scene is lit than I do about the camera side of it. So now, I definitely consider myself to be much more of a G&E gaffer electric side person than I ever was a camera person.
Very cool. Elliot, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. My experience is a little similar to Mark's. I started off in high school doing, my own short films, and I took some classes, and then from there, I went to BOCES and got some experience in video editing. And when I was going off to college, I found a class that was like a technician training course with a couple film locals, and got to grow my network a little bit. And then I went off to college for film, and I networked with some of the upperclassmen, and one of them had a shoot going on and asked if I wanted to be in the grip and electric department, because word had spread that, I had a little bit of experience doing that, and nobody else was really doing it at the time. So I took the opportunity and met the people over at ND Studios. And then from there, I started getting work through them, and then just my network grew, and here we are.
Very cool. And then last but not least.
So my interest started probably around the same time as these guys. I think I was in high school, and I got to my senior year, and there were some electives as far as English courses, and I decided that I wanted to take a film theory class and also acting class. So I've always had an interest in front of the camera and also behind the camera. I started in front of the camera. I started as an actor. I studied extensively at the university level. I traveled abroad for my studies. I started to book some jobs, but I still had an interest in the mechanics of how everything worked. So at one point I decided to go to film school, and that's pretty much where my interest started to focus in on the directing end and the DP end also. The DP end was attractive because I was somebody who was visually oriented, and I always took an attraction to lighting as far as the aesthetics of lighting and how it motivated emotion. And then obviously the directing part were for the same reason. I kind of took my background in acting and also the aesthetical end, and it kind of encompassed both. So when I first started working on sets, I started working as a DP. We shot a lot of film back then, and it was difficult to keep up with the technology at one point because cameras kept evolving, and we started to gravitate out of the film medium and more into the digital medium. And I started to switch a little bit into the gaffing arena and the lighting arena. And that's what brought me to this point as far as being part of an electrical department. I work both on the independent scene and then also on the union scene too.
Very cool. So it sounds like all three of you have really dipped your toes in a lot of different departments. Anthony, I'll kick it back to you to start off. What does the position look like today? Are you currently working on anything exciting?
COVID has kind of changed the landscape for all of us. What's been kind of exciting about the Buffalo area as a whole is, with some additional tax incentives that were passed, and then the attraction to Buffalo for some of its architectural gems. I think the politics are right here and welcoming to outside productions. I also think some of the major cities like Toronto, for instance, I have some colleagues, and also New York, they're becoming overcrowded prior to COVID. So people were starting to, lose space in regard to having sound stages to shoot episodic TV on. So I personally never thought in my career trajectory that I would be actually able to come back home, work in the industry, and sleep in my own bed, but it started to happen. COVID put us at a little bit of a setback, but in the foreseeable future, March, April, May, it looks like a lot of projects are lining up. So I think most of us are going to be back to work, and it'll be nice to get back with our colleagues and get that creative stimulation going again.
And Elliot and Mark, is it looking the same for you right now?
Yeah, it's we had this big, like Tony said, we had this big momentum going, and it started feeling really good last year, and then it sort of scared us when everything shut down, because I was like, I don't, are these Paramount and them, are they going to remember Buffalo in a year and a half when they start shooting stuff again? Because it felt like we were starting to become something, and coming up, it seems like they do. So my hope that Buffalo is going to keep growing is definitely bolstered, which is good.
Yeah, and I think along with what both of them said, that like when Tony specifically said it, I never thought that going to college for film, I would be presented with a booming industry all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it was a great opportunity to start working actually while I'm in college, and I like Tony said, he never thought that he'd be able to sleep in his own bed. And I thought my trajectory was going to be, New York City or California or another big production city. But it turns out I can stay here and work in G&E for the foreseeable future, at least.
Very cool. Elliot, I'll start off with you again for this next one. What does the day-to-day in the electric department look like?
Well, it's different every day, but depending on what you're doing, if you're rigging or if you're a set electrician, you start the morning with, your safety meeting and your tasks for the day. And it's pretty much just work. And it can be anything from, running lines to lights, setting up lights, building lights, unloading, loading a truck, a lot of manual labor. And it's a lot of, terminology that you have to either pick up on the fly or have prior knowledge of, and when you get an order, you have to complete it, with a group of people, and it's pretty much a lot of working and then a lot of waiting while production is doing their thing. You have some downtime to either watch production or you can, do other things if you're able. But yeah, it's just a lot of manual labor, and I find it really rewarding because, we're kind of the ones who are setting up for the bigger picture, if that makes sense. We're setting up and actually doing a lot of the hard work to get the scene lit and to make the scene possible, really. But it's rewarding because it's a lot of hard work, and at the end of the day, I can go home and feel satisfied with what I'm doing, and it's tiring, so then you sleep well for the next day.
Mark and Anthony, does that track with your experience as well?
It does. I would say also, though, that like a big part of what we do is about planning ahead, and not just like on a big scale, not just on like lighting diagrams and distro and things like that, but even as a set technician, planning ahead, the next 5 to 10 minutes. If you're a third, it's watching the set and thinking, okay, what is the gaffer probably going to call for next, so that you can hop to when that happens. And maybe you see a fixture that you think might be called for. There's a light on a stand already, but it doesn't have a stinger with it. Part of being a good electric is going and grabbing a spare stinger and staging it with that, so that if/when the gaffer calls for it, you're ready to go. You've got it. I would say that a big part of being a grip or an electric, for that matter, is just anticipating the calls and being ready, and even just thinking through what you're going to do with your hands just makes everything smoother. It's premeditating basically.
Yeah. Anthony, can you dive in a little bit more about those responsibilities of the electric department? Because it seems like nothing happens without you guys.
Yeah, I want to expand on, Elliot and Mark both brought up good points. So for younger individuals that maybe want to enter electrics, it's always interesting because you're like, do we use the term lighting technician? Do we use the term electric? What does this job involve? And I want to say, if you work in the electric department, it's twofold. We do two things. One, we primarily outsource electricity to the whole set. So a lot of what we do is mathematics. We deal in amperage, we deal in watts, we deal in voltage, but everything on a set essentially has to be lit. And we're not always talking about household, Edison electricity. A lot of times we'll have some sort of generator plant. We run, something that's referred to as 2-aught and 4-aught and banded. Its capacity to hold a load of amperage is rated. And we do a mathematic schematic that basically runs electricity to the whole set. So that's one part of the job. So for newcomers that are coming in, it's really important that they understand the dynamics of electricity because, one, it's fundamental to our job, and two, it's a dangerous component of what we work with. If it's dealt with safely, it's not dangerous, but it's definitely something that you don't want to necessarily walk into naively. The second thing that we do is we operate as lighting technicians. So we work in conjunction with a DP, a gaffer, and we're basically there to fulfill the lighting scheme that's been predetermined or talked about between the director, the DP, and the lighting crew. And it's always interesting because we get some outside influences that come in, whether they're from New York or LA. And one of the things they're looking for out of their lighting technicians, and this comes with time and this comes with repetition, is not just somebody who's operating from the neck down per se, and they're a laborer. And, the gaffer says, hey, can you take that, 5K and wheel it over there and pan it, tilt it up. But essentially you want to get to a point in the job where you're understanding the aesthetical quality of what the lighting is doing. And you have a sensibility about like key lighting versus fill lighting versus edge lighting. So like Mark said, you're already in this kind of predetermined mode where you understand what the director's achieving out of the shot. You understand what the DP is achieving out of the shot. And now you're operating from the neck up and you're being somebody who's preemptive and taking the steps and understanding what's happening schematically. And that kind of understanding is also going to get you out of the technician element of the job and put you into the higher key positions. If you have, maybe you aspire to be a gaffer, or maybe eventually you even aspire to be a DP. And, through the years, it's changed a lot, but I've seen two kind of DPs. Sometimes you have a DP that came from the camera department and they're really fundamentally sound when it comes to camera and lenses and the fundamentals that have to do with camera. And they more or less rely on their gaffer for lighting schematics and collaboration. And then sometimes you get a DP that came from that lighting lane that's really sound on the lighting end of things. And maybe the knowledge on the camera end kind of evolves as they go along, per se.
Gotcha. Mark, I'll pass it off to you again. Can you talk about how the job kind of changes from pre-production into when you actually start shooting?
Yeah, well, it definitely depends on what position you're in. So as a gaffer, pre-production is a lot of conversations with the director. It's a lot of scouting. You're looking at power. You're visiting each location and saying, okay, what does the circuit box look here? Is this house all 15 amp breakers? Because a lot of the times, if you're running big HMI lights, you're not going to be able to support those on a 15 amp breaker. A lot of older houses have those. So then you start talking to production and saying, we're going to need to rent a generator if we're going to shoot at this location. And it's like Tony said, it's mapping out lighting diagrams, making sure, especially when you get to the bigger generators, you have what's called legs of electricity, and you need to balance them. You have to have at least close to equal draw on each leg. So without getting too technical, there's a lot of mathematics, like Tony was saying. At the technician level, there's not as much pre-production, but you still want to understand what you're getting into. You want to know, Are we shooting outside? Are we are we um, are we running off a generator, or are we running off house power? Because your tool belt's going to change. Um, so pre-production varies greatly depending on what position you're supposed to be fulfilling. And then once you get on set, as the gaffer, it's a lot of, in my opinion, everything is all about preempting. Like I said, if you're a gaffer, you're watching the DP, you're anticipating where he might frame up next, thinking about which lighting stands are going to need to fly out, how you're going to maintain the lights that would have been there. You're thinking about when you turn around, how your situation is going to change to create the illusion that the lighting is the same, even though now you really have to change everything that you have set up because you're seeing a whole different side of the world. So in some ways, it's very similar in that you're just trying to understand what the final product is going to look like and figure out how you're going to get there without interfering with the rest of the filmmaking process. And I guess the biggest change is that it goes from being very cerebral to being physical and looking at logistics.
Elliot, I'd like to pass it back off to you. Can you take a second and just kind of break down the roles within the G&E department? We have roles like best boy and rigging electric and company electric and all of these different terms. Can you break it down for us for people who might not know that terminology?
Yeah, sure. So pretty much it's a hierarchy, just like the rest of the industry. You've got your department head, which in this case is the gaffer, in our case. And then underneath the gaffer is the best boy electric. He is taking orders directly from the gaffer, and he's the boss of all the thirds, which are the people at the bottom of the totem pole, the rest of the electricians. And then there's the shop electric who often will be in charge of maintaining the lights and repairs if necessary. And but pretty much it's like a 3-tiered hierarchy, and the gaffer's at the top. Best boy is in charge of also scheduling and time cards for all of the thirds and everyone on the G&E, or sorry, not the G team, but the electric team. And then I would like to say that in terms of pre-production and production, as a third, as somebody who's just coming in basically on the day and not involved too much with pre-production, it's more about planning for the individual. Like for me, for example, I'll take a look at the call sheet and, okay, we're shooting outside. What's my gear looking like? Do I need a new pair of boots? Do I need gloves? Do I need new tools? And planning for the individual, because you are your most valuable asset. You are the person who is working and getting the job done. So you need to be at tip-top shape in terms of your toolkit and your, what you're ready to do. And then when you're shooting, you need to be vigilant and execute. So yeah, that's.
Anthony, you talked a lot about the responsibilities of the department earlier. Can you also expand on how those responsibilities kind of feed into working with other departments? Who do you work with most often?
Yeah. So it's, I think one of the most interesting components of the film industry is, all of us were growing up as kids and we've gone to the movies in some capacity, and you see this incredibly finished, polished product. And most people probably don't know the amount of people that are behind the scenes and what they essentially do. That's why this series is, critical in defining some of those roles. I mean, we see the credits roll. A lot of people will get up and leave prior to the credits, but we work collectively. We have departments, and then of course, there's a hierarchy within those departments, and it's established there for a particular reason, because it creates a level of, accountability, and also it creates a system where we're not stepping on each other's toes and grabbing something that belongs to another department. I think that's really instrumental, like what Elliot was saying. I mean, we have a chief lighting technician who is the gaffer. They work in close contact with the DP, who works in close contact with the director. Underneath, the chief lighting technician or gaffer is your best boy, and they're really instrumental. You can almost think of them as a project manager because they're there to handle essentially the equipment checkout, the management of equipment, and the management of personnel. And then underneath them, you have all your technicians that without the technicians, we wouldn't survive. I mean, they implement the plan essentially. And then we typically have something called a Jenny operator, which is the person responsible for the oversight when we're, extending our power source from a generator per se. But specifically getting back to what you were saying, there's always this question. I've had relatives come up to me and I don't know the best, definition of this, but they'll ask me, what's an electric? What's a grip? And we are both independent departments that work in unison with each other. And we both work under the umbrella of the DP per se. I like to look at it this way. I like to say that the electricians come in, we lay down power, and we also implement the lighting sources that are needed in the lighting schematic. And the grips, not only are they responsible for rigging and safety, but they come in and they shape the light essentially that we put up. So, it's much more dynamic than that, but we work as equals on set. We work in unison with each other. And it's almost like a triad. We have our DP, we have our key grip, and we have our gaffer. And we're all working in unison to achieve this lighting schematic. And overall, this aesthetical quality that the film requires and needs based on whatever the story is about.
Right. Mark, would you talk a little bit about bringing in your own equipment? Does that make you a better hire potentially?
Yes and no. So as a technician, if you're looking to break into the industry and you want to get hired as a third, I don't think owning your own lights makes you more hireable. However, owning your own tools does. So when you walk in as an electric, there's some basic things that you definitely want to have on your toolkit. You need to have a meter. You need to have a they call it a sniffer. It's a voltage detector, so it's a wireless. You can basically put it up to an outlet. It'll beep if it's a hot outlet. You need to have. There's some basic things. So gloves. A multi-tool is usually a must. A C-wrench is helpful as an electric. Definitely as a grip, you want to have one. What else? Just, you want to carry a few cube taps and ground lifts in front of you. And so, little things like that, things that are going to make you handy on the job will definitely show people that you're prepared and that you know what you're doing and you know what you might encounter on a set. That being said, if you're looking to get hired as a gaffer or a department head, then owning your own lights can definitely be helpful because oftentimes you can save the production some money by renting your equipment to them as opposed to them having to go to a rental house. Not that it'll be free, but you do make a little money extra that way, and it might make you selling point. It simplifies things for the production. You like to think that they'll hire people on merit, but that's just not always the way it goes, and maybe it's a little of both sometimes. So yes and no.
Yeah. Elliot, what would you consider was like your best investment, especially when you were first starting out?
Yeah, my best investment starting out was my basic toolkit. I went and bought myself like a pack or like some sort of tool belt, some gloves, nice work clothes like boots and dark clothing. Little known fact that you don't want to wear white as an electrician or any bright colors for that matter, especially if you're a shooter. If you're on set, you want to be as dressed as dark as possible so that in the case that you're close to the camera, you're not reflecting a bunch of unwanted light back into the scene. So things like that. I was told by a mentor of mine that you should invest in tools for yourself to make you more valuable as an employee rather than getting gear and lights, because those most of the time are rented, and you're not, if you're not like a camera person with a focus puller, you're not necessarily valuable with a couple of lamps as you would be with a full set of tools.
Very cool. These next questions I'll open up to really anyone who wants to jump in. I'll start out with the difference between studio productions and independent production. Does your role change significantly when the budget is different?
I want to say one thing, because since we were talking about tools, and I know we have a lot of younger guys and girls watching this that may be looking to come into the industry after graduation per se, and they want to be gaffers, they want to be best boys and girls, they want to be technicians, they want to be Jenny operators. One of the best tools you can have, a home tool, you're not going to bring it to set per se, but this book here is called The Set Lighting Technician's Handbook. It's by Harry C. Box. There is nothing in the industry that is not explained from the perspective of a grip or electric in this book. It's dense. I'm not saying you're going to sit down and read it in one take, but it's going to be one of your greatest guides and cross references. So anyone who's looking to be in the industry and you want to work in G&E, please buy this book. And I have no connection to them, but this was one of the first books that I bought, and I reference it all the time.
There's my copy.
There you go. I was going to say, these guys probably have a copy too. And,
Yeah, I have a virtual copy.
We've all referenced it for, lighting purposes, and also especially for power purposes, as far as dealing with amperage and wattage and voltage. And if you want to know the mathematical calculations of how that's broken down, it's explained in this book.
It really is an incredible resource.
Very good. Thank you, guys. So again, the difference between a higher budget film or a more independent, lower budget film, how does your role change in between?
Can we all take a knack at this one at a time?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Who wants to go first?
You go ahead, Anthony.
Okay. So I'm trying to think, because I thought about this coming into this, because we do have a mix of two worlds here in Buffalo, which is awesome. We have this independent scene, and then we have this union mark that's starting to navigate to upstate New York because it's cost effective for them. And it's also attractive, like I said, because of the locations. And they are dynamically different worlds. I mean, for me, I love when I can get on an independent feature, because I feel like I have more ability to maybe make some executive decisions as a gaffer per se, and exercise my creativity, because in those scenarios, we're mostly working with locals. And one of the cool things about working in Buffalo, New York, is this area has grown together. Most of the technicians are extremely passionate about what they're doing. We haven't been the type of market that's been booming for a long time. So there's an excitement in the air when a project comes to. And then most of us will work in a collaborative process where producers leave and they're like, we really had an amazing experience. And we just saw that with an independent film that featured at North Park called Bad Cupid. So, in that kind of scenario, we're dealing with a lower budget, as far as, let's say, maybe the budget on the production is $100,000, and we have less resources to work with. But with that, it almost creates a sense of ingenuity, because it's like, okay, I may not have a full palette of paints here, but I do have 8 colors to work with. And what can I do with those 8 colors? And also, we tend to have more of a collaborative process as a whole, as far as all the departments working together. And that's just my observation. Maybe some people feel differently. On the union level of things, the dynamic definitely does change, because we're not only dealing with local personnel, but we often have outside sources coming in. And, we're working against the grain per se, because we're a newer market. So sometimes I don't know if they have high expectations in the labor force. And the inclination is always to want to bring in their own people per se. But I can tell you from the experiences of what we had with features, these productions have come in and we've handled the job well. And we continue to grow as a labor force, and we continue to impress. And that's been said over and over again, whether it was Del Toro's film, or there was a recent film that just navigated from Canada to finish off 6 days here. I keep seeing posts that are positive feedbacks of producers and UPM saying how impressed they are with the labor force. The only differential I also want to mention, which is really critical for some of the younger people coming into the industry, and we touched on this, is, there's a high degree of accountability when we deal with union films. So we tend to not be so gracious to step outside of our job zone and per se step on somebody else's territory to do their job. And it's not because we're rude at that level. It's just that there's a high level of accountability. If something goes wrong, then there's an accountability trail where you go to the department head and say, hey, what happened here? The department head is in charge of their technicians, and it all can be accounted for. If I start to step outside of my electric department and start to do jobs outside within the grip department, we fall into a liability issue. And for some that are transferring from the indie level to the union level, that may be a little disjointing, because they may go to do something and a grip or another department would be like, hey, I got that. And it's not to be rude, it's just an accountability level. That's one of the differences I notice. You guys can expand more on that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things you said that I was like, my cat is biting my arm. One of the things that I definitely notice is what, one of the things you focused on, which is the collaboration and the sort of like, call it family style of an indie thing. So on an indie set, if I'm standing by on set and let's say the camera's on a Dana dolly, and the DPS to move it. Now that's typically a grip job. And it's a 2-man job. So let's say there's only one grip nearby. In an indie, I would say, oh, let me help you with that. I'd pick up the other end of the Dana dolly and help them move it because I'm standing there and we're all in this together. But like Tony said, on a big set, it's maybe it's not the right word, but it's a little more militaristic. You have your job, you have your set of things that you're supposed to focus on, and you don't really step outside of that. So, on a big union project, I would step aside. I would say, okay, a grip will come and handle that. That's not really my responsibility. But it is too, like what Tony was saying, the indies are nice because you do get to feel like you put a little bit more of your fingerprint on it. You don't have to be as careful. If you have an idea that you think might improve, you can't really come out and say it, especially if you're a set technician, but you can, if you have that type of relationship with the gaffer, you might be able to go over and say like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if we did that. And they might say no, or they might say, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Whereas on a bigger thing, that's not your place. You shut up, you wait for somebody to tell you what to do. But they're both rewarding in different ways, because the bigger things have this scale to them that really makes you feel like you're part of something really cool, even if you were just lending your muscles.
Sure.
And one of the things Mark is not bringing up is we still have a lot of fun interdepartmentally because we're on our own radio channels. So
Right.
what happens in the earpiece stays in the earpiece.
Very true.
Elliot, do you want to cap off this question? Do you have a preference to independent versus studio films?
Well, I'll just go ahead and say that I'm relatively new in terms of large productions. I only day play at the moment because I'm working on getting into the union. So I'm more of an independent personally. I like those films, but the larger productions, the learning curve is what I really enjoy. The getting hands on the real stuff is what I like to call it. The real gear, the bigger grip pack or electric package, your bigger lights, operating lamps that you only have like on bigger shoots like that. You don't get them for small things. You have to work with what you have. Like I believe Tony said, you have to make do. Like you only have so many paints, but you got to paint with those. And I like that challenge on independent films a lot more. Like you're working with stuff that isn't necessarily the right gear for what you're doing, but you make it work, and it's really rewarding when something like that goes well and you have a cool project to show for. So, and then one more thing I'll say about this is that the larger the film is, the more you can see the collaboration of the different departments working independently. You can really see, like on a big production, if all's going well, but you're only doing your job, but that's all you need to do, and the rest is just kind of taken care of and handled. by the other departments, and it all comes together in this really awesome way.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark and Anthony both spoke a little bit about what it's like to operate within a union. But Elliot, you said you're working your way in. Can you talk about what the requirements are for getting into a union like that?
Yeah, you just need experience. You need to day play. You need a certain amount of hours to get your application in, and you just need to be a professional. That's one of the biggest things. I think you can really have a good knowledge of something, but if you aren't professional and you're not a hard worker, you're not, whatever it may be, you just have to want it and kind of earn it in a way. But I think Mark and Tony can talk more on the actual requirements to get in, especially around here, because like I said, I'm still navigating the waters
Sure.
as we go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whoever wants to
I,
jump
w-
in.
I was going to say it's, if I'm in a position of being a best boy and I'm hiring my crew, this is, ideally what I look for. I'm always the type of person that believes in the philosophy of putting somebody in their strengths, obviously, because we all come with our own given strengths and we all have our own weaknesses. And I'm not going to put somebody in a position to fail per se. So when I'm formulating a crew, I'm rounding out the crew knowing what they're good at and how they're going to excel on the set, which ultimately is going to, reflect back on us as a unit. And then also I want them to have an opportunity when the time's right to strengthen the areas that, that they may lack a little bit of knowledge or experience in. I think the big thing, for anybody who's young who wants to get into this industry is to understand a couple things. One, skill set is huge. That's why we keep referencing knowledge, because we deal in power and amperage and electrical distribution, and then we deal with the fundamentals of lighting a set and why we're lighting it. So that falls under skill set. The second thing that most people don't realize is, if you go in for an average job and you work 8 hours in an office job, there's a set of rules and there's a set of hierarchy that takes place in that job environment, but it's only 8 hours out of the day. All of us can attest that we've been on sets for 14, 15 hours, and we can do that 6 days a week. So the other skill set that you have to have as any person working in the industry is, are you likable? And it's not a nepotism. It's more about, I have to show up to work every day with this gentleman, this lady. Do we all get along as a unit? Because we're like a team that goes out on the field. You know what I mean? We have to be successful at what we do, and we have to be in each other's company day in and day out. And we all hit points where we're burnt out, and that's where we need to click the most, because what we do is long, it's hard, it can be dangerous when you get tired, and you just want to make sure the guys you're around are guys that you want to spend, every day with. The other thing that I think is really important to have in this industry is patience and humility. We're growing as a film community. It's happening as we speak. There's a lot of younger people coming out of university. I personally think, as a projection in the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to grow substantially. And I think everybody's going to get a chance to, get into a unionship or get into the independent scene and do their rounds. So, just being patient a little bit and being humble in the process goes a long way. I mean, I know I came from a different era and it took me that to get to this. And, that's just the trajectory that you have to go through.
Mark, anything more about unions?
All I would say about unions is that it works very different in this part of the state than it does in, say, New York City. So in New York City, people will work for a very, very long time to get into the union, because it's a much more competitive environment. You have to be sponsored by someone coming up. There's a lot more requirements. In this area, for a long time, they were really hungry for members. So you still have to know what you're doing, but they were a little more, a little quicker to get someone pushed through, so that when productions come here, we have a crew base. I think that's probably going away soon, given the number of crew we have and how much stuff is coming here. But it's a real accomplishment to get into the union, because it's just a mark saying that, you're professional, you know what you're doing, and I think it's just really important if you are interested in being in the union that you get to know your local union rep and talk to them about what's required and what you need to accomplish.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Unions are always one of our biggest questions. The other one is what we'll start with next, which is COVID. How has your department changed since the pandemic? And even like since earlier in the pandemic till now, because obviously that has evolved as well.
I think that for us, I think that our COVID answers are probably going to be pretty similar to a lot of other people's, because the actual specifics of what we do, as far as I can think of, haven't changed much. The main difference for me being you have to wear a mask the whole time. You have to get tested before every job. On union shows, typically you're getting tested at least twice a week with rapid tests and a full PCR every 1 or 2 weeks, depending on the show. There's a whole department, COVID compliance, that walks around and sterilizes everything. But aside from having to wear masks, I can't think of any ways that our, electric department specific tasks have changed. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, guys. I can't think of anything specific to our job that has changed other than what has changed for everyone.
I would say that, as far as our job description, that hasn't changed. Fundamentally, we have to show up to set and do the same thing. But the protocol of coming to set has changed, with rapid testing, the usage of masks. Also, most of this has probably been negotiated from, the insurance companies that bond these films, the union ships. It's a protocol that's handed down, and definitely the film industry is in compliance with it based on whatever's, predetermined that needs to be fulfilled to get on set.
Very cool. Elliot, I'd like to start our last question off with you before we go into questions in the chat. Tricks of the trade, something you wish you had known when you first started out that you maybe learned the hard way. And I would like to hear from everybody, but Elliot, if you'd like to kick us off.
This is a tough question because there's so much that I wish I would have known going in. I think the one thing that it's important for anybody to get right is to really know your set etiquette. And I think all things aside, like skill set and whatnot, if you don't know how to be on set, you're just not going to fit in with the crew. You're not going to be a piece of the puzzle that works. Just because you're getting in the way. And that's one thing that I think is really important for newcomers to know. It's know where you should and shouldn't be on set. Know what you should and shouldn't be doing on set. There's a certain level of professionalism expected at any level of production. You're there to achieve something that is very time sensitive, and you can't be wasting time. So set etiquette is established so that it's the most efficient machine that things can be. And I think that that's most important. And I'll get a little bit of details specifically here so that people know what I mean by set etiquette who aren't aware. Specifically in our department, there's certain things that we have to do to let people know we're coming through a room with big lights or whatever, and we yell points or whatever. So something as simple as that, like doing it every time you're entering a room with a light, will avoid an injury or something like that. But there's so much more that you can know and you should know when being on set. Like, you shouldn't be in the eye line of an actor, especially if you're G&E. You should always try to stay on the opposite side of the scene so you're not stepping on anyone else's toes in terms of what they have to accomplish. So I think set etiquette is the most important thing. And then I guess I'll give one more. Just showing up on time. Like, you have to give yourself time. Half the battle of being successful in this industry is just showing up ready to work at the right time. And don't be an hour early. Just come 15 minutes early. Make sure you're seen and your presence is known on set, and that way you can settle in and have a good day of work.
Very cool. Mark, tricks of the trade, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think Elliot really nailed the biggest one, which is, tricks of the just set etiquette. So just don't make a jerk of yourself. be a sponge, especially if you're brand new. Your main goal should be to stand to the side and watch what the people who seem like they know what they're doing are doing. If you're standing by, just head on a swivel and listen all the time. So if you're standing by and you hear the gaffer and the DP having a conversation, and the DP says, yeah, so I think we're going to go ahead and set up a 4K over there. And the gaffer says, okay, I'll be on it. You should already be walking towards that 4K by the time the gaffer makes the call. Just absolutely ears open all the time. And then on top of that, at least the things that made me feel like I was getting better at what I do early on, just things like practicing coiling cable, the little things you're going to be doing all day, every day that really give people the impression that you're someone who knows what you're doing. Coiling cable, folding up combo stands, the little things that don't matter. There's little tricks to those things that, the first time you pick up a stinger and try and coil it, you're not going to do a very good job. You're going to flop it down and it's going to be this twisty mess after you set it down. So just practice those things. Even if nobody asks you to coil up a thing, if you don't have a job and you're standing by the stinger crate, grab one, unfold it, coil it back up, make sure you're good at it so that when you have to do it in front of 10 producers and the director, you're not tripping over yourself. Just the day-to-day to make it smooth. And
Anthony, anything that you maybe learned the hard way that you would like to save some of our viewers from?
I mean, off the top of my head, like the most important part of this business is like knowledge is power. I mean, it's, what's so rewarding about what we do is we do something that's exceptionally fun. I mean, we work in a huge social context. Some people go to a cubicle and they work in an office and they don't have the same sort of social context of what we do. But the bottom line is what we do is a profession, and you get better at your profession by the amount of time you invest, not only on the set per se, but also in your free time. And, whether it's looking at a book and whenever there's a question, and I remember the first days that I spent on set, I mean, you're just sweating bullets with an earpiece in and just hoping something isn't asked of you that you don't know per se, because then it's the humility of saying, I don't know what that is. Can you describe it to me? Mm-hmm. And the humility goes far, but also a little notebook in your pocket of just writing down things that come up that you won't remember in the heat of the moment. But when you get home and you get on a level playing field, you may be able to look up and go, okay, I want to understand what this is. What was this piece of equipment? Or how did he explain to me that I do amperage, determination, based on watts? And, when you, like I said, when you get back to the level playing field, the more time you invest into your craft, the better you're going to get at your craft. And that comes back to what we were saying about, do you want to be a technician as far as a laborer from the neck down? Or do you want to be a thinking force like both these guys have mentioned on set about, taking the initiative to overhear the dialogue between the DP and the director so you're one step ahead in the process? And not only because you're overhearing, but you understand aesthetically why that's happening. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't happen overnight. And that's where the humility comes in. It's, you come into the business like any other business. I mean, people graduate with college degrees. They don't expect to walk into the company and be the CEO, but they may have ambitions to make it to top management, and they work through that chain of command by putting one foot in front of the other and becoming better at their craft. And, the bottom line is being likable and personable and remembering that we're all in the same boat. And, we have our good days and our bad days, but at the end of the day, we have to get the job done as a unit. We're no differently than an ant colony or a beehive. I mean, I love the mechanics of what we do because there's so many moving parts to get that finished product. And, of course, actors and directors and top keys get to stand in the limelight sometimes. But that would never be accomplishable. There is no job on a film set that isn't notable. So if you're on the technician level and you think you're not critical to the to the whole spectrum of the job being done, you're misinformed. Like, we need every person on set. And that's why I say, when technicians come aboard, including myself, I try to get better and better at my craft because you want to be an asset to your crew and not a liability per se. course, there's going to be learning time and there's going to be things you need to brush up on. But at the end of the day, there's stuff you can do on your own terms, and there's stuff that you will continually pick up. And like Mark said, there's a lot of time to drift off and, detach from the set, but sometimes technicians will stay connected to a set purposely because they want to stay engaged. They want to know what the next step is. They want to be preemptive and take that step before anyone else does, just to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, I have one thing to add to that. Mark said you have to be a sponge, and I think that is extremely important. And Tony said that, if the time comes when you don't know something in your earpiece, never be afraid to ask, because one thing that I was initially a little hesitant to do was seem like I didn't know what I was doing. But no, it's actually quite the opposite. If you don't know something, somebody on set is going to be more than willing to let you know what the answer to your question is, or kind of teach you about the craft. Because one thing that is generally pretty common across the industry is that everyone's extremely passionate about what they're doing. So they're going to take the time to tell you whatever the answer to your question is. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you don't know something, please ask.
Very cool. Really great advice, guys. Thank you so much. We have a lot of viewer submitted questions flying into the chat right now, but before we get into that, I want to just shout out the Film Neighbor Network merch store, which will be linked in the chat. We have shirts and mugs and pins. Yep, and then Robin's got hers right there. And all the money from that helps us support a charity that we'd like to donate to on behalf of the Film Neighbor Network, and encourage you to donate to as well with each of our Zoom classes. For today, we have the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, and I'm going to kick it off to Mark just to say a little snippet about why you chose this charity today.
I chose it just because I think it's really important. I've had friends that have committed suicide, and I just think it's something that is. I think that there should be a place for people to go when they're in pain, and any charity that helps make that happen is worthwhile. So.
Thank you, Mark. So again, please check out our merch store. You'll help support Film Neighbor Network and our ability to donate to this charity. And go and follow the links in the chat to donate to the charity yourself. But right now, we're going to go into the film. We answered a couple of these earlier as we were going through, but we're going to start out with one coming in from Sal from Lightwork Media Buffalo. He asked, what's the difference between the shooting crew and the rigging crew? Is there a better place to start for someone new to the industry? And these can be for anyone that wants to chime in.
Yeah, so the shooting crew will typically come in, and okay, so this is on a large set. The shooting crew will typically come in, and the distro, which is the large cabling that comes from the generator, will typically already be laid out. There'll be what we call a lunch box at each place where there may be a lot of electrical activity, and a lunchbox is essentially a box with anywhere from 4 to 10 outlets on it, and they will plug their lights directly into that, or if it's a bigger power light, they'll plug it into what's called a base cable. But the rigging crew comes in either the morning before or the day before, or sometimes a few days before, depending on how much it is. And they're the ones that lay out all that cable. They design, the rigging gaffer and the gaffer together are going to decide how that's going to be laid out. So I would say if you're new to it, a better place to start would probably be the rigging department, if only because the moment-to-moment calls in the rigging department are a lot less urgent, because you don't have 10 departments waiting on you. Typically, you're still pretty busy in the rigging department, but it's more like, okay, we're here at 10 a.m. We have 10 to 12 hours to get 1,000 things done. Doesn't really matter what we get done when, but this all has to happen. So you need to keep moving, but if there's a little hang up, you're more flexible. On a shooting crew, as I said, the whole movie's waiting on you. So if you can't get something done in time, now they're holding the role waiting for the electric department. So it's lower intensity in that way, and there's a bigger opportunity to sponge up information. That being said, there's a lot of things that the rigging crew will not teach you that you do need to know to be on the shooting crew. So I think it's important to do both. But if you're brand new, you don't know your set etiquette and stuff, I would say rigging department is probably a better starting place. That's my opinion anyway.
Thank you. Our next question is about breaking into the electric department from being a PA. Any advice on that?
I have some advice on that. So I was working on my first set as a PA, and I was not really enjoying myself. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. And all I did was I went over to the grip and electric department when they had some downtime. They were all kind of hanging out against the fence or whatever it was. And I said, hey, I'm really interested in doing this. How do I get into doing this? And Cash Costner, the key grip of the shoot, was like, you know what, we got to shoot. He's like, do you want to do this? He's, are you serious about doing this? And I was like, sure. And he said, well, maybe you can come out and help us on this next one. So it could be that easy. That was kind of my experience with it, but also, you know, it's really your network. You have to know people in G&E and express your interest in order to get in. Because if you're standing back and kind of wishing like, oh, I really wish I could be doing that, well, you're not expressing it to anybody. You should always be vocal with your wants when you're trying to jump from department.
That's right.
I got a great story.
Uh-huh. Go ahead, Tommy.
I was going to say, I got a great story about being a PA and kind of getting your chance in the electrical crew. And there's a gentleman that asked a question. I had originally gotten in contact with him because there was a production that came in town, and his father and a colleague of mine were friends. And he had recently graduated from college, and he wanted a chance of working as a PA on a set. I was friends with the UPM on that production, and I really appreciated the initiative that he had in this email that he had sent me. And it reminded me of myself when I was younger and the initiatives that I would take to express my interests. And I said, okay, I can't let this fall at the wayside. I got a hold of the UPM, and I said, you know, this is a recent grad in the area. Is there any way we can get him on the production as a PA? Make a long story short, she hired him. Down the road, I was on another production and I needed additionals, which, you know, that's a great opportunity for young guys trying to break into the business, because they are not per se my set technicians that I need to rely on in the heat of the moment. It's more about me pulling out of a location that we may have been at for numerous days. I'm working at a level of a production value where I don't have a rigging crew. So once we finish shooting, we have to essentially pull out of that location. I asked two of the union guys if they could work. One put me on hold, then he couldn't. The other one put me at a yes, and then he had to back out at the last minute because of schedule conflict. And right there and then, that was where I was like, you know what? This is a great opportunity to show that PA what it is to be an electric, because if he ever has an interest in this department, I like his personality, I like his work ethic, and I don't know. I know he's attracted to camera, but maybe I can attract him to electrics. And I hired him for that. So, you know, it's a series of events, you know, like Elliot was saying, and who knows that it would have led to that. But, you know, that individual taking an initiative and expressing that he has an interest goes a long way. It may not be in the immediate, but you just don't forget that. And you go, oh, wait, here's this perfect opportunity. I think I'm going to bring that PA aboard and see if he wants to work with me as an electric.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you, Anthony, for being one of those industry workers that encourages and tries to bring more people in. Our next question here is from Mitchell. They say, I've been working as a gaffer on micro-budget productions where I'm usually the only person in the department, and I'm often using my own fixtures, tungsten, LED, small, HMI, etc., running off of house power. Are there any training programs locally that would help me get hired as an electrician / entry-level position on the type of projects that you all work on?
I can't think of any formal training programs. I mean, there is a wealth of information out there where you can absorb that stuff and be more ready for when the opportunity arrives. I think a lot of it comes down to what Tony was saying. You know, reach out, make your wish to work on bigger stuff known, and get to know people who might be able to make that happen. And it's not necessarily you don't have to suck up to them. It's not about you just make acquaintance with them and make them aware that you're interested, because it happens all the time where we need a guy and you text your three main dudes, they're all busy. So you start thinking, okay, who else knows stuff about electric and isn't gonna, for lack of a better term, embarrass me if I bring them on. And you think, the Mitchell guy I was talking to, he seemed to know what was going on. Let me see if he's busy. So I think more so it's about cutting your teeth on the information that is available out there and being ready and willing when the opportunity does arise. One of the things we touched on earlier was, it's so important to know your stuff, and this is a highly technical field, but it's also so important to be the type of person that someone can see spending 15 hours a day, 6 days a week with. That's the bigger fight, and it's actually a prerequisite for anything, I feel like. So it's about making friends, which is, I know it shouldn't be, but it's important. Like it's the kind of thing that maybe seems political on the outside, but and you think it should be mostly merit based, but it is. It's all part of one big skill set, which is working on a film set. It's just the nature of it.
It's the same protocol you'd probably see in any corporate job environment. I mean, obviously there's a resume and job credentials, but you sit down for an interview very specifically to see what the person's personality is and likability, because you have to share this environment with them day in and day out. And I don't think departmentally we work any differently.
All right. Thank you, guys. Our last viewer submitted question here is, what department do you work with a lot that isn't expected? So obviously we talked about working with camera and grip, but do you guys work with the art department? Anything we wouldn't expect?
Yeah, crafty. You give them you give them power oftentimes for toasters and whatnot. So that's the one unexpected one that I've experienced the most. But
Crafties are Achilles' heel because they draw so much power. I mean, a toaster,
so
for instance,
unexpected.
draws 12 amps. So usually when we get some sort of notification, it's Crafty blew the breaker. What can we do?
Always.
How can we get them power? They're our Achilles' heel.
Crafty always pops the breaker. The other one that I can think of is art department for fixtures and anything. Maybe there's a art department put up a lamp post in the middle of the playground you're shooting on, and depending on the size of the job, typically there should be shop people in the art department whose job it is to wire up those fixtures, but oftentimes it also falls on the electrics, whether it's a rigging or a shop electric. It's all sort of fluid. But we do work with art department in that way. We'll walk in and maybe they installed a bunch of lamps on the underside of the porch of a house, and we have to run zip cord to get all those powered. We work with pretty much every department. Production, we have to go and get base camp all fired up. That's usually one person's job for the first half of the day on really big stuff. Or maybe their whole job on the whole movie. I know you were base camp Jenny op on Quiet Place, right, Tony?
I was shop electric, but I've been base camp Jenny on quite a bit of projects.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we work a lot with production, just getting anything that needs power, you name it, we're there.
yeah, I've worked with hair and makeup a lot, getting sometimes we film in locations where there aren't any like makeup lights, so you have to set up actual like production lights. That's on more indie stuff, but when they don't have lights for their makeup station, then or their hair and makeup station, then you need to sometimes run power to them and hook things up.
Right, and I wanted to say something too, because I feel like it'll be an injustice not to mention it, but when I think of lighting department and what attracted me to it, per se from a cinematography eye is, a lot of what we do is technically oriented. There's a technical skill set that is needed to do the job, but we're also an aesthetical job that's driven by emotionality. It's like when you asked that question, I thought of right away art department set decks. And lighting, to me, when we light a set, purposeful, but also aesthetically, because we know the audience is looking at the lighting design of the set, and it's creating an emotional response, which is basically supporting the theme of whatever the story is or the scene is or the intention. So, I always feel like when you're a gaffer or you're in that lighting lane, you're almost like a painter with a palette of paints. We deal in depth of field. We're lighting foreground, middle ground, background. So there is this technical trade that comes into it. But what makes a technician good at lighting is an understanding of the aesthetical quality of what we're doing and how that translates emotionally to the audience.
Very cool. That sounds like a great place to end this class there, Anthony. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you to all three of you, obviously, for sharing so much great advice today. We really appreciate answering all of our questions here. To the viewers, again, please go and check in the chat for those links. And if you want to review this class, watch it over and over and over again, or send it along to your friends that weren't able to join us live today, it'll be up on our YouTube and our Facebook pages, Film Neighbor Network, everywhere. Special thanks, obviously, to Hannah Waltz and Robin Lazera for making all of this happen. Props all around.
Yeah.
And unless there's anything else, thank you very much, guys. I hope you guys had fun.
Thanks for having us. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Had a blast.
See you guys on set.